Hi, my name is Brian Johnston, and for the last 30 years I have been an advocate for the medically dependent and the emotionally vulnerable when their lives are at risk. I'm the author of the book Death as a Salesman: What's Wrong with Assisted Suicide? And in fact, there's a lot of reasons assisted suicide is wrong, and legalizing assisted suicide is something that should be avoided and worked against. I was asked today to specifically talk about medical ethics. We know that just the phenomenon of suicide is a very dangerous thing, that when someone expresses suicidal thoughts, they're actually giving emotional signals that they're very depressed. They need emotional help, and simply granting their wish isn't the way to fulfill that emotional need. They may have also an underlying illness that could or could not be treated, but the emotions and the depression is clearly treatable, and that's what we need to do and have always done. That's what good hospice care does. It takes care of the physical and, most importantly, the emotional needs. Good hospice also intervenes to take care of the emotional needs of the family members, because a lot of times their emotions need to be addressed. They've never been through this circumstance, and they can give the wrong message to that patient when they say, "Oh, I just want to die." "Oh, sure, well then, if you want to die, we'll kill you." No, what they really need is to understand that situation. So they need good counseling so that they can say and support that person in a good way. So that's what good hospice does. Assisted suicide is extremely risky if legalized, because the risk of manipulated suicide is very clear. That family member may not be an heir, but they could be, and often are. But even if they're not going to inherit or benefit from that death in some way, they're definitely going to benefit by not having to take care of that patient anymore. So that subtle psychological pressure from them, they might not even recognize. When it comes to medicine, though, this is the most powerful aspect, because we're not talking about killing someone with a revolver or a knife or taking their life by hanging. We're talking about the use of medicine. And this is a very, very important issue that we have to examine very clearly when it comes to society and our laws. I'd like to read to you briefly from a portion of this book, and I have a whole chapter on medical ethics. There's many, many things. We won't have time in this video to go into all of them, but you need to understand the risks. Here's a quote from a doctor in the 1750s. He was a German doctor, Christoph Höfland. "The physician presumes to take into consideration in his work whether a life has value or not. The consequences are boundless, and the physician becomes the most dangerous man in the state." Now, what Dr. Höfland was expressing there in the late 1700s has been expressed many, many times in the past. We know that the beginning of modern medicine and the beginning of modern medical ethics was, in fact, with the ancient Greeks, and with a famous Hippocratic oath. See, this is not a new issue. Hippocrates expressly said, "I will give no deadly medicine," even if asked. So even if someone is asking, whether it be the patient or a family member, the physician swears that they will not give that deadly medicine. The Romans then distilled that down to a rule: do no harm, primum non nocere. The physician cannot kill according to medical ethics as we have come to understand it. Now, many anthropologists have said that oath is the beginning of Western civilization. That it is the Hippocratic oath and the practice of medicine as we know it that defines Western civilization, because there's now one member of society who will protect other members of society and never harm them. See, before the Hippocratic oath, the doctor was in fact very, very dangerous. The doctor in primitive societies could kill. That doctor is known to us as a witch doctor. And if the doctor came to your house, you never really knew if that doctor was there to cure you or perhaps kill you. Perhaps you were paying the doctor a chicken for their services to try to cure you, but what if your neighbor had given the doctor a goat because the neighbor coveted your house and wanted you gone? There was no way that you could really know for sure. We have come to trust the doctor now because of the Hippocratic Oath. Trust a physician implicitly that they will only benefit us. This is the only member of society that you're instructed to go into a room and take off all your clothes and tell your doctor everything. This is a very important relationship in the doctor-patient relationship. That will be lost if medicine is used to kill. If the laws are changed so that medicine is now a killing tool instead of a healing tool. There are many other aspects of this. I'll quickly go through some of them. We know that doctors are very overworked. It'll be a temptation in their work if they can use killing as one of their possible cures. They have to get on to other patients. The risk there, even for good doctors, is that they would be tempted just to get this particular case over with. But what about the risk of coercion? What about the risk of outside forces on that doctor? What if those who are running that health plan have said, doctor, we can't pay you? It's called capitation, by the way. Many doctors are paid on a per patient basis. They will get, let's say, 100 patients, and that plan will pay the doctor for their 100 patients a flat fee. Well, if you have to spend a lot of money or one or two of those patients, it might be a lot cheaper if they're gone and you get cheaper patients in your care. That's a lot of outside pressure on a doctor, one that we really can't afford. There's many other aspects of this. The fact is, again, if the doctor can kill you and you go into that room and you've got a black mark on your skin, you don't know what it is, you think it might be the big C, you might be reluctant to really tell the doctor that. You won't be as free to indicate those serious conditions that you have. It's very important that implicit trust continue. But I want to explain something even further. Doctors have been asked by ethics to never kill for one very basic reason. They're the most likely to do so. Ballerinas don't have to swear they'll never kill. Plumbers don't have to swear they'll never kill. It's because they don't have that kind of occasion. Doctors have that occasion all the time. See, doctors are very well trained in the human body. If anyone understands how a human body functions and how to cease that function and do it in a way that's quick and efficient and to the point, it's a physician. So physicians are made to swear under our old standard of medicine, and that's what's at stake here, that they would never use it to kill because the temptation can be so very, very great. In the question of legalizing physician-assisted suicide, this is a case where it might be your loved ones or even your own life that's at stake, but I want to get across a much deeper and more important issue. Society itself is at stake right now in this debate. The very foundations of society as we have known it will be lost if physicians are free to kill. I'd like to read from another anthropologist. Again, many anthropologists have outlined the Hippocratic Oath was the beginning of Western civilization. Wherever we've seen it violated, and there have been times throughout history, whether individual physicians or even societies have walked away from the oath, and they walk away from Western civilization. Again, this is something from Margaret Mead in her work on the physician. With the Greeks, the distinction was made clear. One profession was to be dedicated completely to life under all circumstances, regardless of rank, age, or intellect. The life of a slave, the life of the emperor, the life of a foreign man, the life of a defective child. This is a priceless possession which we cannot afford to tarnish. But society is always attempting to make the physician into a killer, to kill the defective child at birth, to leave sleeping pills beside the bed of the cancer patient. It is the duty of society to protect the physician from such requests. A very important statement from Margaret Mead, anthropologist, regarding the foundation of society and our respect towards the physician and not putting them in that position. Why is that? Again, many reasons. If you look back on World War II, we know that was a Western power. The Nazis, under that regime, basically did a lot of bad things. But the Nuremberg trials were not putting the Germans on trial for invading France or Poland or the Low Countries or any of those other acts of war. They were actually put on trial for what they did to their own citizens. In 1948, the Nuremberg trials had a very specific trial called the doctor's trial. And in the doctor's trial, physicians and judges were tried for their role with the civilian population of Germany. Now, you may think that it was all aimed against the Jews. In fact, it wasn't. They were merely the last ones to receive the treatment. The Germans actually had instituted long before a program to clean up the master race. They actually did not let it be applied to the Jews. They wanted to make sure that the master race was cleaned of defective gene pool. And they actually had a lot of costs. After World War I, the economy in Germany was very tight, so they had socialized medicine. They had many World War I victims of vets who had mustard gas, terrible scars, and basically were being kept by the state. They also had quite a few children that they considered defective children, and the phrase was they were needless eaters. So a program was developed called Tiergarten 4, the T4 program, Tiergarten, named for the street in Berlin where the offices were located, Tiergarten 4. This program was actually aimed at mercy killing, and you can see that in the book. You can see actually the page from the newspaper where they announced that it was out of mercy and love that they were doing this. That was solely to clean up society and to legalize mercy killing, and physicians were actively involved in that. I want to read briefly from Leo Alexander, who was actually a witness for the United States at the trials at Nuremberg. And what he said about those trials: the beginnings at first were merely a subtle shift in emphasis on the basic attitude of physicians. It started with the acceptance of the attitude, basic in the euthanasia movement, that there is such a thing as a life not worthy to be lived. That was the beginning of the Holocaust in Germany. That's why we were involved and put those physicians on trial and declared these crimes against humanity. That's why human experiments were acceptable to those physicians. That's why using human beings as things that could be disposed of was acceptable. That's why using medicine to kill in the name of mercy was acceptable, because they had departed from the Hippocratic Oath. We've already mentioned the fact that society is the one that must govern medical ethics. I didn't say that. I'm simply repeating the words of many others. I didn't make up these statements in this phenomenon. The fact is that unless society tells doctors, you can't do that, please don't do that, society will bear the burden and the responsibility for this. That's what's at stake in this debate. What's going to happen is that physicians will be, once licensed, they'll be free to kill, but they'll be killing at the behest of others. I want you to think about this. There are 3 members of society that actually have the ability to kill, and that society has empowered to use that carefully, but to use it. The policeman is given a badge, authority, and a gun. The military are given weapons and the authority to use them. And the doctor has been given great training and the ability, unfortunately in some circumstances, if this becomes law, the ability to kill. In all of those circumstances, unless society says, stop, you cannot kill this person, you have, in the case of the police, a police state. Now, you won't mind, if you're friends with the police, that won't bother you, because it won't be used against you. If you're part of the administration, it won't offend you. In the case of the military, a military dictatorship. In the case of medicine, a medical dictatorship, where medicine is used as a killing tool by those with authority and power. Let me tell you what's happening right now in Oregon. It is legal to kill patients who are vulnerable. A very interesting case has been documented called the Cheney case. It happens all the time, but this one came to light because of the doctors who wouldn't go along. Mrs. Cheney had Alzheimer's. Her daughter brought her to the first psychologist and said, my mom wants to kill herself. It's legal in Oregon, so I'd like her to be killed. Will you give her the poison? That psychologist said, I'd like to talk to her first. He talked to her. He said, I don't hear suicidal ideation. She hasn't mentioned that at all. She doesn't seem like she does want to kill herself. The daughter took her to another psychologist. Interestingly, the same response. This is called doctor shopping. It becomes common where this is legal. Finally, the third psychologist said, sure, I do that. I'm part of Compassion and Choices. I'm a killer doctor. I'll do it. In point of fact, that doctor was merely fulfilling the wishes, not of the mother, of the daughter, who had authority and power. When doctors are available to kill, they will do so at the request of those with power over them, as well as power over that vulnerable individual. It's society's responsibility to protect the doctor from that temptation. Western civilization is built on a legal and medical ethical structure in which the medically dependent and the emotionally vulnerable will not be killed, will not be disposed of. What's at risk in the assisted suicide debate is not just the handful of people you may hear about. What's at risk is everything. Society itself is built on the fact that we take care of those in need and that we don't kill them. Thanks. Please join us in fighting assisted suicide.